going to hear a conversation between an agent and Scott. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now listen to the tape and answer the questions.
Howdy, what can I do for you?
I'm here to ship some things back to China.
Okay, we can do that. Shipping things back, eh? Have you lived there before?
Yeah, I lived there for 3 years and came back 2 years ago. Now I'm going back to start my own business.
Really? Did you ship things with us last time?
No, I used a Chinese shipping agency.
Well, I'll just let you know that rates have changed recently, so I don't know if they'll be comparable to what you paid before.
It doesn't matter to me. My company's paying for it.
Aha, then it's nothing off your skin, right? Okay, I'll need your name and where you need to go to pick up the items to be shipped.
My name is Scott Linder, Linder, and I live in upstate New York, Saratoga Springs.
Oh, sure, I know that place. I go to the races there. Great town. What's the zip there again?
770425, and the street address is 412 West Lake Road.
770425 Westlake, got it. And how big of a container are you going to be looking for?
Well, I didn't have a container last time, and I don't think I'll need one this time. I think that I'll have about 6 cubic meters.
We can get a subsection of a container then.
How big is that?
It's 2 meters wide and 3 meters long.
2 meters high, right?
Yes, sir.
Now look at questions 6 to 10. As the talk continues, answer questions 6 to 10.
And for customs, I need to know what sort of items will you be shipping?
Mostly furniture. But we'll also have quite a few boxes of books too.
Any clothing?
Nope, but we'll have some bicycles and wood that we use for a loft bed.
Be careful with those bicycles. I hear bicycle theft is a big problem in China.
Not if you know how to secure your bikes and where to store them.
Well, good luck. How valuable do you want me to list the entire shipment as being?
Let's say about $3,500.
Great. Now you'll also have to go over to the customs department to check with them about shipping the wood over to China. I know there are concerns about termites, bugs, etc.
No problem. It's the same wood I brought over from China last time.
Then you should be okay. It's just a formality. And last of all, where would you like the shipment to be delivered?
Well, I will live in Beijing, but let's ship it to Tianjin. My company will pick it up there.
That's all right then. Have a nice trip.
Thanks for your help.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You'll hear a man talking about living and working on Trinidad. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinfold, and I'm here today to tell you about my gap year, which I took about 20 years ago. Unlike many students these days who go travelling or get some work experience between school and university, I decided to do something completely different after finishing my degree. I applied to work for a charity organisation. What it does is it sends people with particular skills to countries where those skills are needed. Apart from having some experience teaching English to summer school students, I didn't have any particularly useful skills, I thought, but luckily I was still accepted. I had to find the money for the flight, but you get free accommodation. I stayed with a family of 5. And you do get paid, but not much. It's a bit like pocket money, enough to get by. I worked in an orphanage and taught English at a local school. Where was I? Well, originally I was going to be sent to a village in India, but at the last minute the organisation decided to send me to Trinidad. Now, this is a fascinating place. It's an island in the Caribbean. Well, in fact, the country is actually 2 islands. The smaller one is called Tobago, which is connected somehow to the word tobacco. Anyway, there I was, a young white guy living and working on an island which is mostly a mixture of descendants from Africa and India. The Africans were originally brought over as slaves, and the Indians came later as indentured workers. That means they agreed to come for a specific time, but many of them stayed. There are also some Trinidadians of Chinese and British origin, though the native inhabitants were basically wiped out by colonialization. I myself felt completely accepted and had the time of my life. The language everyone speaks is English, so there was no problem for me there, but some concepts don't quite translate. They're pure Trinidadian. There's the term liming, for example, which means sitting around watching the world go by. Also, there's the famous carnival, when the whole island is taken up in playing mass. For a whole month, around February or March, it depends when Easter is, everyone's busy preparing costumes, practicing calypsos, soca and steel pan music, and most importantly, partying.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
When the actual official carnival starts, it's days of 24-hour dancing in the streets. In Trinidad, it's called whining. You've probably seen this sort of thing on TV, in the more famous carnival in Rio, or even at the Notting Hill Carnival in London. Many people join bands, each one of which has a theme. For example, the Sea or Jungle Fever, and they have costumes designed and made to go with the theme. These can cost $1,000 for the king and queen of each band. They're incredible. The whole city is a non-stop party zone, full of colour and sound. It's serious too. The bands are in competition and the winner gets $1 million. Sorry, I got a bit carried away with those memories. Back to my real job there. The orphanage was called St. Augustine's, and that's also the name of the place where it was, St. Augustine, a town just outside the capital city, Port of Spain. I didn't have any particular job description, just to be with the children and tell stories, sing songs and play games. Oh, and we also went camping in the jungle once. I could tell you a few stories about that particular escapade. Every time I arrived at the gate, kids would come running towards me, shouting, with big smiles on their faces. The younger children seemed fascinated by my blonde hair and loved to touch it as if it was something miraculous. The English teaching I did 2 days a week in a primary school for 6 to 11-year-olds. The kids may have been poor, but they all wore neat and clean uniforms and were so respectful and enthusiastic. I've now been teaching for many years in different countries, and I still think those were the best students I've ever taught. What else did I do while I was there? I swam a lot. Can you imagine what it's like swimming with dolphins and with pelicans diving into the sea right next to you? More seriously, I trained to be a Samaritan. That's someone who listens and supports people who have problems with their lives. Overall, what I took from the experience was a sense of being in another culture, or rather cultures. As humans, we all share many characteristics, but we express ourselves in various ways. In Trinidad, there are lots of different communities and religions, and so many different kinds of festival to see. Hindu, Muslim, Christian, as well as some rather mysterious African traditions. There are quite a few Rastafarians too. Trinidad is, as Americans are fond of saying of their own country, a melting pot where everybody is greeted warmly. Go and see for yourself. I'm not sure how it's changed since I was there, but I'd love to find out.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between Helen and her tutor.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Come in. Ah, it's you, Helen. What can I do for you?
Well, it's about that essay on non-verbal communication. I'd like a bit of advice, if that's all right.
By all means. That's what I'm here for. How can I help you?
It's about that survey you asked us to carry out about body language.
Oh, yes. I asked you to investigate what sort of touching is permissible between friends of the same sex and friends of the opposite sex.
That's it. And then you wanted us to go on to compare the answers we obtained from people from our own culture with the answers of people from other cultures.
Well, that shouldn't be too difficult. There are students here from dozens of cultures, including Asia and the Middle East. Go and ask them.
That's the problem. I'm not sure how to word the questions.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Go and ask them.
That's the problem. I'm not sure how to word the questions. I think I've got far too many. People don't want to be bothered answering them all.
Is that the list of questions you have with you? Let's have a look. I see. Your basic idea is fine. You've got a checklist of the parts of the body we mostly use to touch people with, and a checklist of the parts of other people's bodies that we usually touch. But you don't have to go right through the list asking a separate question about each item. You can make your questionnaire much shorter if you ask open questions.
Open questions? What are they?
Sometimes we call them WH questions. What, when, where. Those are examples.
Oh, I see. Yes, we learned about them in grammar. I hadn't realised how useful they'd turn out to be. I could just ask one open question about each subject and tick the answers I receive.
That's right. Now, let's have a look at the list of parts of the body you're going to ask about. I see. You've got the head, arm and hand, and, oh, it's over the page, the back, leg and foot. What about the shoulder and the thigh? They're important areas, and there are some others you should include too.
Oh, yes, of course. I was in a rush and forgot those. What about asking people how they feel about being touched? Surely it's hard for people to put that sort of feeling into words.
Yes, you're right. That's why it's essential to work out a rating scale for each response.
Can you tell me a bit about how to use rating scales?
Well, there's no way to measure how strongly a person feels about something, of course. All we can go on is what they report about their feelings. So what we do is offering them choices of ways to express how they feel. Very strongly, strongly, or not at all. That would be an example of a rating scale. In this case, as your survey is only a small trial sample, I suggest you use that 3-point rating scale I've just described. Very strongly, strongly, or not at all. That'll be enough to enable you to draw some broad conclusions. You may go on to refine your survey later if you decide to specialise in the study of non-verbal aspects of behaviour.
Thank you. I'm much clearer now. Could I ask you one last question? I'm afraid I've got a brain like a sieve, but I just can't remember the technical term you told us for the study of touch. It sounded like happy, but of course it isn't.
Oh, you mean haptics. Haptics.
Of course, haptics.
That's it. Happy to be of service.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about how adults and babies communicate. You should answer the questions as you listen because you will not hear the recording a second time.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hi, I'm Emma Bailey, and today I'm going to be talking baby talk. Hopefully, you'll find the subject interesting rather than infantile. I'd like to start by getting you to imagine a scenario. You're in an office or at a family gathering when a mother comes in with her young baby. Like everyone else, you want to see the mother and baby, and you probably want to talk to the baby. How do you do this? What kind of language do you use? Recent research has shown that adults all talk to babies in similar ways. They repeat phrases over and over again in a high-pitched sing-song voice with long vowel sounds. And if they ask questions, they exaggerate their intonation. Researchers have discovered that this kind of language, which they have called motherese, is used by adults all over the world when they talk to babies. And according to a new theory, motherese forms a kind of framework for the development of language in children. This baby talk, so the theory goes, itself originated as a response to another aspect of human evolution, walking upright. In contrast to other primates, humans give birth to babies that are relatively undeveloped. So, whereas a baby chimpanzee can hold on to its four-legged mother and ride along on her back shortly after birth, helpless human babies have to be held and carried everywhere by their upright mothers. Having to hold on to an infant constantly would have made it more difficult for the mother to gather food. In this situation, researchers suggest, human mothers began putting their babies down beside them while gathering food. To pacify an infant distressed by this separation, the mother would talk to her offspring and continue her search for food. This remote communication system could have marked the start of motherese. As mothers increasingly relied on their voices to control the emotions of their babies and later the actions of their mobile juveniles, words emerged from the jumble of sounds and became conventionalized across human communities, ultimately producing language. Not all anthropologists, however, accept the assumption that early human mothers put their children down when they were looking for food. They point out that even modern parents do not do this. Instead, they prefer to hold their babies in their arms or carry them around in slings. They suggest that early mothers probably made slings of some kind, both for ease of transportation and to keep their babies warm by holding them close to their bodies. If this was the case, they would not have needed to develop a way of comforting or controlling their babies from a distance. It's not only anthropologists, but also linguists who challenge this explanation for how language developed. They say that although the motherese theory may account for the development of speech, it does not explain the development of grammar. Nor, they say, does it explain how the sounds that mothers made acquired their meaning. Most experts believe that language is a relatively modern invention that appeared in the last 100,000 years or so. But if the latest theory is right, baby talk, and perhaps fully evolved language, was spoken much earlier than that. We know that humans were walking upright 1.5 million years ago. This means that mothers may have been putting their babies down at this time and communicating with them in motherese. We can be sure that this is not the end of the story, as anthropologists and linguists will continue to investigate the origins of this most human of abilities, language.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.